A small turtle of a dirty green color is slowly walking on the ground, on the deserted soil that had no trace of any living plants. As the turtle took another step, a mysterious dark silhouette appeared behind it, resembling a person who cast its shadow over the turtle. Above the turtle stands an ordinary-looking guy at first glance. He has dark hair, a moderately muscular figure, but despite his appearance, he possesses an extraordinary ability. The youth touches the turtle with his fingers and firmly grabs it by the shell. With little effort, the guy lifted the turtle, leaving it flailing its limbs helplessly in the air, trying to escape from the grasp of the youth's hands. No matter how much he ate, the guy couldn't feel satiation, and his stomach could digest whatever entered it. From under the shadow of his hair, gray, glassy, empty yet predatory eyes are visible, hungrily piercing into the turtle. In an instant, where the turtle's head was, only splashes of blood remained. The turtle didn't even have time to react to the threat and continued to struggle in its death throes, but it was too late. With powerful and incredibly swift jaws, the guy chewed the turtle's head in an instant, leaving nothing of it. The guy developed his ability in any way possible, unreserved in his methods. Drops and streams of blood fell onto the ground, staining the sand red, as if emphasizing nature's prime law. After what he had done, the guy with bloodied lips looked down, contemplating his life and what to do next. The guy gazed at the ground, his face exuding confidence and cold-bloodedness, while his eyes gained a lively aspect. He was consumed by the development of his abnormal abilities, striving to claim the top position in the food chain. An unknown amount of time passed since consuming the turtle. The youth's face changed. He matured. His face became sharper, and his facial features acquired angularity. To fully realize his potential, the youth became a poacher in Africa. Sitting at home next to a trophy head, he cleaned his rifle. Suddenly Eddie, a fair-haired youth, opened the door to the house and, addressing Kim in English, informed him of a new job opportunity. Without entering the house, he came to convey that General Lightning needed gorillas. Eddie occasionally threw work Kim's way, so his visit was not unusual. Eddie works for General Lightning and is Kim's partner. Kim decided to clarify whether the general needed whole bodies or specific parts. Eddie, pointing to his head, says that the general only needs gorilla heads and hands. Loading his shotgun, Kim asks how many gorillas the general needs, to which Eddie gives a brief answer of at least 2. The general needed gorillas. As a true connoisseur of twisted art, he wanted to make ashtrays out of their hands and use their heads as simple wall decorations. Finished loading his shotgun, Kim accepted the order and planned a trip for the gorillas the next day. In response, Eddie only smirked cunningly, but Kim didn't pay it much attention. He didn't care as long as he was getting paid for his work. Turning around and waving his hand, Eddie bid farewell to Kim. His expression at that moment did not inspire trust, and the cunning smile didn't leave his face. The next day, the gorilla hunt began. In the distance, the mountain peaks were visible, while underfoot, thickets and dense tropical forests spread out. Eddie and Kim walked through the forest, pushing through dense thickets, seeking danger and the gorillas they needed for their order. Parting tree branches and shrubs with their hands, they moved further into the forest. Kim's face took on a particularly serious expression during the hunt. Gorilla hunting is not an easy job and comes with numerous challenges and dangers. One of these threats was other poachers, but an even bigger threat was other people, the gamekeepers. The gamekeepers had better equipment than the poachers and patrolled the forest for money, making the poachers' work much more difficult. But they also had their enemies in the form of rebels. Poachers armed with rifles are no match for well-equipped gamekeepers and rebels who posed a significant danger to people in their profession. Upon encountering any of them, the best course of action would be to run, and Eddie and Kim knew this well, hiding in the thickets, trying not to attract undue attention. Kim's mind was filled with questions about why there were so many soldiers in the forest today. He realized that he wouldn't be able to work properly while they were here. The sounds of gunfire echoed from a distance. Kim decided to ask his partner if they were going the right way at all. Without turning, Eddie confidently replied that he knew the way. Suspicions started creeping into Kim's mind. The terrain didn't look like the kind where they would find gorillas. The forest was becoming sparser, and vegetation was decreasing. He decided to voice his suspicions. Before Kim could finish his question, Eddie interrupted him with an angry shout, declaring that this was definitely the right way. Immediately after Eddie's shout, they were surrounded by soldiers, people in full gear resembling special forces, armed with automatic weapons. Introducing himself by his full name, Eddie explained that he worked for the UN, an international law enforcement agency. He said all this while addressing Kim by his criminal alias, Pet Shop. Kim grew wary, but surprisingly, the only thing he was interested in this situation was how Eddie knew Korean since he had been speaking English all this time. Taking handcuffs from his back pocket, Eddie explained that he knew Korean due to the 10-year pursuit of Kim. His face displayed a mixture of malicious satisfaction and sadistic joy from the job he had accomplished. Eddie revealed that over this time, he had learned about 5 other languages besides Korean. These were the languages of the countries where Kim had been and where he was pursued. Eddie's hands trembled with tension, and Kim's eyes sank into shadow. As he put handcuffs on Kim, Eddie listed all the crimes he was accused of and for which he would be punished. And there were quite a few. The police van, doubling as a vehicle for transporting suspects, sped out of the forest, carrying the world's most dangerous poacher. Kim, in handcuffs, sat surrounded by special forces while his former comrade-turned-traitor sat across from him. Glancing from under his brow with eyes lost in shadow, Kim decided to ask whether all this poaching had truly been a big lie. With a slight sardonic smile, Eddie confirmed his suspicions and revealed that it had been pre-planned. Eddie recounted how challenging it had been to get close to Kim, boasting about what a wonderful actor he was. As Eddie conveyed the hopelessness of the situation to Kim, he was interrupted by an incoming call on the wall-mounted phone inside the van. Picking up the receiver, Eddie seemed confused. He didn't understand what the person on the other end of the line was saying and what they meant by 2 echoes. Suddenly, Eddie was interrupted by a strong jolt of the vehicle. Everyone was alarmed by the jolt except for Kim, who sat calmly in his handcuffs. Veins on Kim's face started reddening and protruding. Kim's ability allowed him to absorb everything he consumed, gaining the abilities and attributes of what he ate. Kim's teeth and jaw began to deform. More teeth emerged, sharper than before. His grin increasingly resembled that of a shark. Kim's clothes started tearing. From under the tatters that remained, dark green scales resembling a crocodile's skin emerged. Eddie's face and eyes froze with horror as he stared at the terrifying sight unfolding before him. Steam burst forth from a dark abyss filled with needle-sharp fangs. Kim's hands grew larger, tearing his jacket and becoming covered in fur. His nails turned into claws. Chains restraining the beast snapped. It was precisely due to this ability that Kim earned the nickname Pet Shop. The special forces sitting next to Kim stared in confusion at what was happening, looking towards the creature beside them. Next to them sat a creature of unbelievable proportions. It shivered, but that only unsettled the special forces further. They began yelling at the creature. Without much thought, the special forces began firing their rifles at the creature. Within seconds, there was nothing left of the special forces but bloody stains on the walls of the van. Before Eddie stood a monstrous humanoid figure, only remotely resembling a human. It exhibited traits of a wolf, a crocodile, and a shark. Its eyes glowed with a bright red light from within. Gazing at Eddie with its red, predatory eyes, the creature inquired about his last wish. Frozen with fear, Eddie couldn't find words to say. He nervously chuckled and called Kim a monster. Even behind a metal partition, the bus driver heard that something was amiss in the cabin. He was about to check it out to figure out what was happening. However, before the driver could react, a massive paw with sharp claws effortlessly pierced through the partition. As a result of these events, the van skidded and crashed into a tree. Debris covered the crash site and black smoke filled the air. From the wreckage of the van, someone's foot firmly stepped onto the ground. It was none other than Kim, who with his bare hands tore apart the van that was transporting him. He was covered in blood, his clothes torn. He left behind a cabin filled with blood. As he stepped out, he raised his head to look at the sky, giving him a sense of newly regained freedom. Surveying the sky, Kim was taken aback. He hadn't expected to see what was before his eyes. Impressed, he managed to utter a couple of inarticulate sounds. Above Kim's head, 2 moons of different sizes were visible. One of them was 3 times larger. Their crimson light illuminated him from head to toe, drenched in red blood. Standing under the open sky, Kim recalled his former, now deceased partner who worked in international police and was associated with the UN. The traitor lured Kim into a trap and arrested him, putting him in handcuffs. Despite it all, Kim escaped from the cursed van, killing everyone who tried to punish him in the name of justice. Standing in the blood, gazing at the night sky, the moonlight illuminated his face. Looking at the 2 moons in the starry sky, Kim realized that this was certainly not the Earth he knew and lived on. Thoughts crossed his mind that this might even be better than continuing to live on his native Earth. On Earth, Kim committed an incredible number of crimes, always hiding from authorities. He thought that maybe now he would finally have the opportunity not to hide from everyone. Before he could finish that thought, signs of movement appeared in the bushes behind him. Kim immediately understood who had come to him. He focused, his face darkened, his gaze sharpened. Wolves surrounded him from all sides, forming a pack. The wolves encircled him, baring their sharp teeth. Kim only disappointedly remarked that he thought predators could recognize when they were faced with an enemy they couldn't defeat. Glancing around and beginning his transformation, he looked at the wolf standing behind him. It was the pack's alpha, easily recognizable to such an experienced hunter as Kim.
This was a sturdy gray wolf with a large cross-shaped scar on its its forehead, its demeanor and physique clearly showed who the alpha was.
In an instant, the alpha wolf roared, and all the wolves lunged towards Kim, aiming to tear him apart on the command of their leader. Kim clenched his teeth, preparing for a fight against the pack. His face began to grow reddish fur with dark patches, and his teeth transformed into sharp fangs like razors. Within a moment, the gorilla with a tiger's head roared, tearing through its clothes. Hearing this roar, the wolves hesitated. In their eyes, one could discern the natural fear of a stronger being. The wolves' paws gave way, losing all strength. They were not prepared to run any further. In an instant, the wolves scattered, and amidst them, something streaked like a hurricane at incredible speed. The alpha didn't even comprehend what had happened to his subordinates, let alone notice what had passed between the wolves. Behind the alpha's back, Kim appeared in a split second in a form that was something between a tiger and a gorilla. He had arrived so swiftly that no one noticed him. With a strong hand, he seized the predator by the neck and brought it down. A loud thud resonated as Kim struck the ground, dislodging a fang from the leader. One blow was enough to kill the wolf. Blood began to flow from its jaws, forming a crimson pool. The remaining wolves stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Without their leader, they were disoriented and incapable of action. Kim emerged victorious from the battle against the pack. After the alpha's demise, the wolves began to scatter, while Kim simply stood and observed. Hunger started to consume Kim. He decided that his first catch in this new world would make for a satisfying snack. He positioned his teeth over the wolf's body and bit down. Surprisingly, he couldn't pierce the wolf's fur, which was truly odd since a tiger could easily devour a wolf. Not willing to remain hungry, Kim opted for a more creative approach, transforming into a hippopotamus with shark-like teeth. Finally succeeding with his catch, Kim surveyed the remains and pondered once more on how strangely challenging it had been to acquire this prey. The primary obstacle had been the wolf's fur, which he couldn't bite through in the usual manner. To overcome it, he had to employ a rather complex combination of abilities. Even though outwardly he looked like an ordinary wolf, the impenetrable fur wasn't the only thing that intrigued Kim. He was amazed by the excessive influence his roar had on the wolves. For a typical predator, an adversarial roar serves as a demoralizing factor, but in this case, the effect was much more significant. According to Kim's expectations, the wolves should have hesitated at most, but he managed to make them effectively retreat before him. This was atypical behavior for such predators, as his common sense told him. In a moment, his glassy eyes stared off as he contemplated his thoughts. Gazing at the two moons, he pondered whether seeking rationality in this world was worthwhile. After all, it wasn't the same world he knew. Events take us a week ahead. Kim gnawed on a bone, greedily devouring every bit of remaining meat, leaving nothing on the bone. Finishing his meal, he tossed the bone over his shoulder. A large pile of bones lay behind him. The discarded bone fell into the heap, which comprised skulls, ribs, and a multitude of diverse bones. The cave was a feast. Throughout this week, he actively hunted the local fauna and had indulged in a variety of animals. One of these creatures was a bear with massive paws. He also consumed a three-eyed snake, uncertain whether it was venomous, and a deer with interestingly sharp antlers, resembling two long spears. Despite the minor differences that set them apart from Earth's creatures, they were quite ordinary, Kim concluded as he exited the cave. Kim sought some patterns and rules governing this new world, but he hadn't yet found what he was looking for. Nonetheless, Kim held on to hope of understanding this world and set off for another hunt. The forest vegetation was parted by the stranger's hand, clearing a path. This was a man resembling a ranger or hunter. He had fairly long light hair and appeared rather concerned, as if he were lost in the woods. Lurking for prey like a true predator, Kim observed the first person he had encountered in this world with surprise. Keeping his gaze on the man, Kim decided that it wouldn't hurt to ask him for some insights about this world. With his massive paw, Kim touched the man and mentally communicated with him. After feeling the pressure of the paw, the man appeared even more bewildered. Beads of sweat formed on the man's face as he turned around, not knowing exactly what stood behind him. Despite Kim's incredible ability, there are specific limitations. For example, he can't create a second head on the spot like he could with hands. These two body parts aren't anatomically analogous, unlike hands and paws, for instance. Furthermore, Kim cannot fully mimic those whose anatomy significantly deviates from human anatomy, like arthropods or mollusks. When he replaces body parts to gain certain abilities, he often loses others in the process. Having a falcon head, for instance, he couldn't produce anything other than a deafening roar. The man, upon witnessing the incredible creation, became fixated on the creature and froze, whether from fear or amazement. Moments later, the man hurriedly fled from the forest encounter with the monster. As he ran, he shouted in an unfamiliar language while Kim didn't rush after him. His escape was short-lived, as the same deer with sharp antlers, which Kim had caught before but in a different manner, rammed into the man. The deer galloped away, leaving the man lying on the ground in a pool of his own blood, succumbing to his injuries. In his human form, Kim approached the man who was barely alive. The man, lying amidst his own blood, lifted his eyes to Kim and uttered something in a language only he understood. Grappling with the language barrier, Kim regarded the man with a contemplative gaze, as if deliberating on something. Perhaps he was disappointed that he couldn't extract valuable information from this source. Kim knew he couldn't help the man in this situation, yet the lack of means for communication rendered it pointless. Instead, he decided that consuming the man might be a good idea to acquire his knowledge. By mimicking the consumed creature's brain, he could gain its knowledge and memories, a highly valuable ability in a world where he knew so little. With the man's clothes and knowledge, Kim could gain many advantages, including knowledge of an unfamiliar language and the ability to integrate with the locals. But the most valuable to Kim was not the language or clothing. It was the handbook the man carried, the guide to the monsters of this world. With this guide, he could learn a great deal about the fauna, their capabilities, and habitats. Events jump ahead by 2 months. A seemingly worried troll is covered in sweat, his mouth agape. With small eyes and an incredibly large nose, his oral cavity is filled with fangs and 2 massive tusks. Over time, more details emerge. The troll gazes at Kim, who in turn marvels at the troll's remarkable regenerative abilities. The mystery of the situation gradually unravels. It turns out that Kim isn't examining an entire troll. He's focused on just its head. Kim is conducting experiments on trolls, with remains or other living parts of his test subjects around him. With one hand transformed and the guide in the other, Kim studiously inspects the troll's internals. Swiftly extending his clawed paw, he likely damages something within the troll's internals. After a second, the seemingly motionless head reacted to Kim's actions with a loud and piercing scream. Kim couldn't ignore this, so he diverted his attention from his experiments and decided to return to the troll. A cunning and joyous smile appeared over his shoulder. He seemed to have been waiting for the troll to show signs of life. Like a mad scientist, Kim wanted to discover the capabilities of the incredible troll body. He was interested in the temperature their bodies could withstand and the limits of their regeneration. He had an unhealthy fascination with all these experiments. With a manic expression, he stared at the troll and closed the handbook. Then he posed a rhetorical question to the troll, uninterested in whether it wanted to answer. He desired it, and that was sufficient. Events shift to a vast northern forest within territories controlled by the Onyx Okus clan. Seated on a throne of bones was a red-skinned orc in a black-hooded cloak. Before him stood a man bearing weaponry on his back. The man recounted an ancient prophecy predicting the emergence of an unknown beast in the large forest. This creature would destroy and consume everything in its path, utilizing the abilities of anyone its bloodthirsty jaws could reach. This creature wouldn't merely be an animal. It would be a true monster, a calamity for all lands, a world destroyer. Somewhere in the great forest, within troll territory, the troll leader and some other trolls surveyed their domain. The troll leader had a wide, sharp jaw and carried a massive homemade hammer on his shoulder. At his feet in the grass, the leader noticed small tracks that clearly didn't belong to a troll. Even to the troll, it was evident that these could only be human footprints. The troll chieftain quickly grew angry and began to shout about the guards who weren't at their posts despite their duties. Licking his lips with his very long tongue, the troll explained that he couldn't understand where the guards had gone, but now, in his opinion, everything had fallen into place. Enraged after drawing incorrect conclusions, the troll slammed his weapon into the ground with all his might, leaving cracks. Without much hesitation, the leader ordered the traitors to be found until something of the person remained. It seemed the trolls had a taste for human flesh. After a few seconds, one troll beckoned the others. It seemed he had found something leading to the traitors. Events returned to the cave where Kim conducted his experiments. In the form of a beast, he was just about to feast on the troll head. However, the noise from outside the cave distracted him from his meal. He shifted his attention from his feast to the trolls who were searching for him. Despite the change of plans, Kim wasn't at all opposed to this turn of events. His test subjects were running out, and he needed new ones. Thus, it was quite convenient that the prey came to the predator. The group of trolls drew closer to the cave, led by the enraged leader thirsty for justice. Approaching the cave, the leader sniffed the air, trying to discern the scents emanating from within. He distinctly sensed the smell of a human coming from the cave. This only fueled his anger and malice even further. One of the subordinate trolls decided to express their concern and strange premonition. Something definitely felt off to them here. However, consumed by his anger, the leader didn't hear anything anymore. He continued his tirade against the traitorous guards. Yet another troll, sniffing at the cave, sensed a strange scent, one that shouldn't have been there. It was a smell very reminiscent of troll blood. This greatly alarmed the troll. In an instant, he froze in horror. he saw something that momentarily robbed him of speech and the ability to make any sound. Emerging from the cave, opposite the troll leader, stood a dark and robust silhouette of a vampire who seemed to have long surpassed the limits of its physical strength. The trolls tried to warn the leader. Noticing this danger too late, the leader was stunned. However, there was no time for contemplation. He had but a moment to react. Clutching his hammer tightly and attempting to ready it for combat, the troll leader prepared to strike. Yet the moment passed, and it was not enough time for the troll to react. With a powerful strike from his large paw, Kim splattered the troll into a bloody mess. The combination of the large paw and the incredible physical strength of the trolls was a remarkable pairing, giving him immense power. Even Kim was taken aback by how devastating and incredible this combination was. He was fascinated. Eventually, Kim remembered that killing the trolls he wanted to use for experiments wasn't a good idea. Other trolls were left bewildered by the death of their leader, and gazed upon the horror Kim's strike had left behind. One of the trolls, fueled by anger and courage, prepared to fight the monster that had killed their leader. Swinging his club and charging toward the vampire, he sought to kill him, hoping to defeat him. In an instant, Kim destroyed the enemy's weapon with a single blow and severed his arm. The troll didn't even have time to react before he found himself without a limb, left only to wonder what had just happened. Another moment passed, and the troll now saw wide-open jaws before him, preparing to strike with razor-sharp fangs. Kim decided that the best course of action would be to poison this troll using the venom he obtained by consuming a snake. The paralyzing venom was the most effective way to counter the troll's incredible regeneration. The venom quickly spread through the troll's body. Slowly, he lost more and more control and the ability to do anything. Within a second, the troll fell to the ground. The last troll, who had stood captive in fear, could do nothing but watch and tremble in horror. For a moment, he diverted his gaze from his comrades towards the cave. From there, he faintly heard some sounds. The troll strained to listen in order to understand what exactly he was hearing. He discerned the voice of a barely living troll from the cave, who only urged him to run. It was the only and best thing he could do. However, before he could do anything, Kim, in his monster form, approached him. The troll froze before the monster, slowly transforming his head from that of a wolf to that of a troll. Kim asks if the troll wants to join his friends lying near the cave and in the middle. The troll could only scream, realizing the inevitability of what awaited him. Kim struck the troll. This is evident from the cry left in his wake. Right after that, violet blood, typical of trolls, spilled onto the ground. For several more months, Kim conducted his research experiments on the trolls. The trolls begged for death, considering it a better fate than enduring endless tortures. Returning to the manual, the most intriguing part for Kim was the description of the monster's abilities. All these abilities reminded him very much of video games, which made him quite skeptical of the accuracy of what was described in the manual. However, later on, all this information found its confirmation during hunts for beasts and other creatures. During his observations and experiments, Kim highlighted some important points for himself. The first thing he noticed was that abilities only work on those who possess them. He understood this when he was bitten by a snake with a venomous bite. The venom didn't affect him. The only thing left after the bite were wounds from the snake's venomous fangs. Attacks that deal damage without using abilities work on everyone. For example, after being bitten by a bear using a local snake and an earth snake, both were able to poison the bear successfully. Also, this is precisely why, during the encounter with a pack of wolves, the wolves abruptly retreated when Kim roared. Summing up, Kim was practically invulnerable to the abilities of the local inhabitants, while his attacks and abilities had a significant impact on his surroundings. With such an advantage, Kim understood that he could become the strongest being in the world. In the world where he used to live, humans, through the use of technology, were gradually conquering the world. In such a world, no matter what creatures Kim consumed, he would never be able to defeat humans with their scientific and technological advancements. Human technologies are much more potent than any creature, and this is a rule that Earth follows. However, this world is not Earth, and here everything is entirely different. A large number and diverse species of monsters in this world terrorize humans by hunting and killing them. This is a world where science and technological development do not exist, at least not in the form they were on Earth. Local people have no nuclear weapons, no tanks, and not even firearms. From childhood, Kim's main goal was to become the strongest and most powerful, and now it is finally possible. All he needs for this is to consume everyone in this world and acquire all abilities, such as the incredible regeneration of trolls, which can even restore the brain, or the equally incredible strength of orcs, for which they are known. And of course, the dragon's flame, which is rumored to be able to overcome any armor and metal. The events shift to the dragon, specifically to what is in its shadow. A small green slime gazes up at the dragon with admiration and astonishment. Bidding farewell to the dragon as it disappears over the horizon, the slime remarks that it had only seen dragons in manhwas before. It turns out, this slime was a person who was reborn in this world in the form of a slime, similar to Kim, capable of devouring anything and acquiring the abilities of its victims. In the past, he was a person with an appearance that would appeal to a very rare gourmet who was interested in anime. Now, he plans to become the strongest in this world. A little bewildered, the slime asked himself if he could actually achieve what he was currently thinking about, uttering the word status, which is classic for such situations. A small bright panel like those from games appeared in front of the slime. It was an informational menu displaying the slime's characteristics and abilities. He was pleased that his hunch had paid off and yielded the expected result. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a snake slithering by. An idea formed in his mind. The snake didn't even notice the slime and continued about its business peacefully. For now, the slime hadn't caught the snake's attention. Finally, it looked at the slime and was surprised. Before the snake stood a massive wave of slime, ready to crash down like a tsunami and engulf it. Using an ability, the slime fell on the unsuspecting snake with its full mass, completely covering it in slime. Within seconds, the snake began to dissolve in the corrosive interior of the slime. When the snake was almost gone, the slime, having taken a bite, breathed a sigh of relief. The slime grew slightly stronger and acquired a new ability. At the same time, the system informed him of the cost of using the devouring of beings. The consumption of souls was the price for using such a unique ability. However, the slime didn't attach much significance to this. Intrigued by its newfound power and smiling, it planned to figure this out later, being fully confident that it could restore its soul's energy later. Digesting an incredible number of beings encountered along the way, the slime, with a sly smile, considered itself the ruler of this world. Leaving behind only bones and crawling forward, it muttered to itself that a difficult childhood linked to parents had ideally prepared it for this. This slime, mentally a monster, was destined to fight against monsters and eventually, after depleting all the energy of its soul, to destroy itself in this struggle. It was chosen by the goddess of the island of Elmond, however not in the role of the main hero of this world. The events shift to the true main hero, who was chosen by the goddess of the island of Elmond and received her blessing and patronage. He was a youth with light hair, a cape on his armor, and a sword with a golden hilt and a red gem encrusted in the sword. He adheres to the warrior's code and becomes stronger as the world faces greater threats. But despite this, he couldn't stop the monster, the world destroyer, who with its power, plunged the world into chaos and killed the hero. As if through force, the warrior opened his eyes again. His gaze appeared troubled. Opening his eyes, the hero realized he had been transported back in time, 10 years before his death, when he was still very young. The goddess had given him one last chance to correct everything and stop the beast, the rider of the apocalypse. The events returned to the orc camp, where the warrior came to tell about the ancient prophecy. A sharp pain raced through his chest a second later. The pain was strong enough to interrupt the young man's speech and make him clutch his heart. The pain was caused by his lie, which violated his code. There was no prophecy, but he couldn't tell the whole truth. No one would believe him. Peering at the youth from beneath his hood, the orc elder asked the hero to explain in more detail about the unknown prophecy. The youth readily agreed. As the youth recounted, a beast will appear in the great forest, capable of devouring the abilities of anyone it consumes. As he says this, the silhouette of the monster that subdued him emerges in his mind. He grimaces, recalling it. After hearing the hero's story, the elder orc realizes that if this is true, they are likely to face significant problems and troubles now. The youth, not understanding him, asks again. The old orc tells the hero that in recent months, trolls have been decreasing in number. Most of them disappear without a trace. Now knowing about the prophecy, he scratches his beard and contemplates that perhaps the trolls aren't disappearing for no reason, and this beast aims to acquire the troll's ability for rapid regeneration. Realizing this, the hero became wary. He understands the danger it entails.
Having good fire resistance and rapid regeneration, trolls are indeed a prime target for the beast from the prophecy.
Knowing he can't waste time, the warrior hero plans to investigate the places where trolls usually roam. According to his reasoning, this way he might be able to locate the monster. Clenching his fist with all his might, he promised himself to stop the beast by any means necessary. Meanwhile, events return to Kim's cave. He's updating information in his guidebook, adding personal notes using troll blood. Finishing with the guidebook, he shifts to other tasks at hand. With a cold gaze, acknowledging the death of most of his subjects, he looked around to see the lone survivor. Kim stood amidst numerous troll corpses, holding the freshly updated guidebook. Glancing over his shoulder, he looked at the living troll head in the bucket behind him. The battered and barely alive troll head, trembling either from terror or exhaustion, implores Kim to finally end its suffering. Igniting a small club wrapped in torn cloth, he agrees to the talking head's plea. As he burns the bodies, he says it's time to put its poor soul to rest. Before parting, he mentions how he somewhat grew attached to the head, but in order to continue his experiments, he needs to move forward and find new subjects. Holding a torch to the troll's face, it felt significant relief. This torment would finally end, and it could rest. Waiting for the flames to scorch its face, the troll closed its eyes, fully prepared for death. However, with time, nothing of the sort occurred. The troll, not understanding what was happening, opened its eyes to comprehend what was wrong. Meanwhile, Kim once again opened the guidebook and read that from troll blood, one could brew a rather useful healing potion. Intrigued by this potion, he decided to postpone the troll's execution. The troll stared at him in horror. Understanding that this would never end, tears streamed down the troll's face. It just wanted to finally die. No more, no less. As Kim prepared the troll blood potion, he read the guidebook carefully. Meanwhile, the troll continued to plead for its death. In the guidebook, Kim found something very, very interesting. He found his new target. They were the lizard men who inhabited the swamps of the Great Forest. Although they were sentient, they were aggressive towards humans, which is why they were included in the monster guide. Lizardmen were semi-reptilian, semi-mammalian. Kim found this intriguing for himself. A plan immediately formed in his mind on how to use this, so the target was chosen. The hunt for the man-eaters was on. The events shift to the swamps of the Great Forest. A small squad of lizardmen patrols their territory, searching for unwelcome guests. The area is covered in fog and tall trees without any green vegetation. One of the lizardmen noticed something in the fog, becoming alert. In the distance, within the fog, they saw the silhouette of a troll with a hammer, slowly wandering through the swamp. Whispering among themselves, the lizards noted that they haven't encountered trolls on their territory for a long time. One of the lizardmen confronted the troll, asking how it dared to come onto lizardman territory. Before he could finish, a massive hammer flew from the nearby lizardman, knocking him off his feet and sending him far away. The first lizardman to arrive was in complete shock, looking toward his fallen comrade, but there seemed to be little left of him. When he returned, the being they assumed was a troll was already standing right next to him. It was a troll with the head of a snake resembling an earth cobra, proportionate to the rest of its body. The snake widely opened its jaws and grabbed the lizardman by the neck, choking him. The lizardman merely gurgled quietly, trying to say something. Nearly losing consciousness, he managed to utter his final word, "Monster," as his dark eyes rolled further back. In an instant, a whole lizard was in the snake's mouth, with only its tail sticking out from the not entirely closed jaws. The last, third lizard didn't understand what was happening or what creature it was facing. Stunned, it couldn't do anything to help its comrades. Chains of fear bound the lizard, growing tighter and restraining him as he continued to gaze at the monster before him. Although the lizard didn't know who was before him, he understood that the mere existence of such a monster posed a danger to his race. Thoughts of this pushed him to action. With a swift and strong thrust, he drove his spear into the monster's shoulder. Although the strike significantly injured the monster, it didn't matter. Right before the lizardman's eyes, the wound he inflicted began to heal at an incredible speed. The lizardman was shocked by what he saw. He recognized the regeneration of trolls. However, before he could do anything, the creature with the snake head injected venom into him from its fangs. Two swift venomous shots hit the lizardman's eyes precisely. Surprisingly, the venom burnt his eyes, causing irritation, redness, and deteriorating vision. Barely discerning anything through his irritated eyes, the lizardman couldn't believe that it could be venom. He denied it even, not considering such an option. Meanwhile, the creature was approaching him. He knew that lizardmen are immune to poison and can't be poisoned, but could this really be happening? These thoughts troubled the lizardman as the creature came closer. He knew lizardmen are immune to poison and can't be poisoned, but could this really be happening? These thoughts troubled the lizardman as the creature came closer. In an instant, the lizardman falls onto his back into the water, splashing it in different directions. In his own eyes, he seems to no longer see anything. Dragging him through the water, Kim takes the cannibal with him. In a moment, they both vanish, leaving silence once again over the swamps. The events return us to the slime. It leisurely digests the orc within itself, leaving only a menacing skull behind. Having finished eating, the slime expels the unwanted skull from itself and tosses it onto the ground. After devouring the orc, the slime complains that there's nothing much to gain from orcs, and they yield little experience and levels. Concluding its complaints, it notices a vivid aroma emanating nearby. It's a potent and strong scent of blood coming from a dark cave not far away. It becomes curious about what's inside the cave. Utilizing the newly acquired wolf abilities, it decides to check if anyone is in the cave. Through this ability, it learns that there isn't just one or two entities in the cave, but more of them, and they all present potential experience for the slime's leveling. It decides not to miss the opportunity to quickly gain a couple of levels, and foreseeing the benefit, smiles and slithers toward the cave. Approaching the cave, the slime sees something unexpected, leaving it shocked by the cave's contents.
Inside the cave, it witnesses a mound of corpses, and the cave itself resembles either a battlefield or a bloody dark abyss where one could enter and likely not come out.
For a moment, the slime freezes with an inexplicable expression on its face. A bouquet of emotions is visible on its face, from disgust and incomprehension to concern about what it has seen. In the next moment, amid all the other emotions, the slime rejoices at the treasure it has found, and the amount of experience it will gain if it devours everything it can here. It doesn't know what happened here or who did it, but it knows one thing. Licking its metaphorical lips, it's very thankful to whoever left all of this behind. Without much hesitation, it engulfs everything within its viscous body. Done with its meal, the slime belches, continuing to digest the remnants of the feast. Right after that, it immediately started to explore its new abilities acquired from the consumed creatures. Among them were all the abilities inherent to the cannibals and the regeneration of trolls. Before it could fully experience its newfound skills, a shadow fell over it. Behind the slime stood a warrior in a cloak. He gazed at the small slime standing before the bloodied cave, and he smirked cunningly. Glancing around, the slime was surprised. It saw an unfamiliar human. Not waiting long, the slime decided to interrogate the youth about who he was, scrutinizing him critically. The warrior had come here following the troll tracks, sensing a strong, malevolent aura emanating from this place. According to his expectations, something dreadful should be expected here. Imagine his surprise when, upon arriving, he saw nothing more than an ordinary small slime. The youth immediately grasped that something was definitely off with this slime. And while the slime aggressively fired off one question after another, the youth had a premonition. This premonition suggested that this slime was the embodiment of pure evil. As the slime continued with increasingly aggressive questions, the youth's premonition grew. Without hiding anything, the youth identified himself as a warrior, which he was. The warrior's code prohibits lying and requires revealing one's identity. Dissatisfied, the slime, through its demeanor, displayed its discontent and questioned the warrior again. Then it launched into a tirade against the hero. Annoyed that the hero held the title of a warrior, not it, the slime concluded that the hero was sent to help it level up. After that, the slime launched into its second tirade, expressing its disappointment that it expected a dragon, not just an ordinary human outcast. The hero understood little from the slime's words, but he grasped that the slime was saying something offensive towards him, but he wasn't concerned. Lost in thought, the slime inquired of the hero whether he was blessed by a goddess. The warrior simply nodded in affirmation, after which the slime laughed at him and his goddess, stating that if she blesses riffraff like him, she's no better than riffraff herself. The youth frowned. It seemed the slime's words about the goddess struck a chord with him. The youth's sword gleamed in the light, while the slime continued to mock the goddess, telling her that there'd be a place for her in its harem. Unable to restrain himself, the youth confidently grasped the hilt of his sword, preparing to draw it from its scabbard. The youth recounted that he was accustomed to mockery and offensive words directed at him or his kin, and he, like a true warrior, forgave all these people. As he spoke, he no longer resembled a proud warrior fighting for humanity. He seemed more like someone possessed by the desire to kill a maniac. With trembling hands fueled by anger, he drew his sword. He had never encountered being so disrespectful towards the goddess Elmond. The slime noticed that its words had struck a chord with the hero, and decided to continue until the hero interrupted. Drawing his sword and brandishing it threateningly, the hero pierced the slime with his gaze, causing it to freeze in astonishment. Wrath filled the youth. His face was clouded, and his eyes stared continuously downward at the slime that dared to disdain the goddess. He ordered the slime to shut its mouth. In that very moment, the slime felt an incredible pressure, whether from the words or the atmosphere, and it was utterly bewildered. Not understanding exactly what had just happened, the slime felt humiliated. Its inflated self-esteem shattered like a fragile porcelain vase under a rhinoceros's foot. The youth towered over it. Nervously and gritting its teeth, the slime struggled to grasp what had just occurred and why everything had changed so dramatically. It didn't like anyone being above or better than it. It wanted to remain the best. Collecting itself, the slime hesitantly asked if the youth truly wanted a fight. Although it was not against the idea either way, it was curious what title it could gain by defeating such a warrior. But its biggest interest lay in the abilities it would obtain if it absorbed the youth, which it mentioned to the warrior. The hero didn't let this pass unnoticed. He became wary upon hearing about the absorption of abilities. Thoughts flashed through his mind. Could this slime be the beast that would kill him in the future? In an instant, the slime enlarged and lunged at him, attempting to engulf him. The hero didn't even try to dodge or defend. With a swift sword strike, he cleaved the slime in two, slime splattering in all directions. Pieces of slime fell to the ground, leaving sticky stains. The majority of the slime reformed, but a small portion remained on the ground. Seeing this, the hero began to prepare a spell. In an instant, flames appeared where the slime had been, indicated by the warrior's hand, and the slime evaporated. It didn't matter what kind of slime it was. The hero knew that if he destroyed one part, it wouldn't regenerate. At least, that's what the hero believed as he looked at the damaged slime. The slime lacked its upper portion, and it seemed to be in dire straits, but it didn't give up and had an ace up its sleeve. It utilized the recently acquired rapid regeneration ability, causing the slime at the site of the wound to swell and bubble. In just a few seconds, the slime was completely whole again, and reveling in this useful ability, it boasted about its restored body. Seeing this, the hero became convinced that this slime was indeed the monster that would destroy the world and kill him in the future. The stone in the hero's sword began to shine more brightly, as if being infused with power. Gripping his sword and extending his other hand towards it, the hero prepared a powerful magical spell. He decided that it was time to finish the monster now, once and for all. Blinded by the hero's light, the slime didn't understand what he was talking about, but he couldn't ask either. Raising his sword towards the sky, the hero named his spell. A bright star appeared in the sky, visible even on a sunny day. In an instant, a bright column of light descended from the star onto the slime. Breaking through the branches, it fell to the ground, passing through the slime. The slime, pierced by the column of light, wailed and couldn't comprehend what was happening to it and where this light came from. The events bring us back to the swamps of the Great Forest, where Kim remembers how he couldn't communicate with a man while in his beastly form. But now, after having devoured the cannibal, he can even speak with a reptile head. In the form of a troll with a serpent head, Kim attempts to produce his first sounds. The combination of mammals and reptiles is indeed astonishing, and opens up a multitude of possibilities. In the swamp, there's another small group of lizardmen who are surveying their territory. Kim, not concealing his presence, approaches the lizards. He needs more subjects for his plans. One of the lizards noticed Kim's approach, but surprisingly, it didn't show aggression. It appeared more amazed than angry. Gazing with interest at the mound, the lizardmen, not understanding much, tried in astonishment to grasp who stood before them. Next to the lizard stood a much larger lizard, its scales being gray unlike the turquoise of the other lizards. It was hard for the lizard to fathom that they were representatives of the same race. After a moment, another lizard shouted to the hesitating one to attack the unfamiliar lizard nearby, as he clearly wasn't one of them. He stood out too much. A moment later, 2 spears pierced Kim in his bulk. The spears passed through Kim's body and jutted out from his back. As if ignoring his wounds, Kim, exposing his palm, sprayed his poison onto it. Grasping the cannibal's head with this hand, he spreads the poison across the enemy's face, damaging his eyes, nose, and other sensory organs. The lizard, with what seemed like a burned face, fell to the ground. Its combat comrade, not comprehending what was happening, watched all of this, bewilderedly holding his spear. Gathering himself a bit, the 2 lizards prepared to attack. Holding their spears, they ran towards the intruder. In an instant, both were neutralized by precise shots of poison into their eyes. They were paralyzed and lost the ability to resist. The last lizard stood still and couldn't move. Frozen before the monster, the last lizard's only option was to seek help from the patron of lizardmen, the Crimson Spark. A lizard emerges from the water with a troll's body, his hands occupied by 2 lizardmen he's dragging along. Reaching the shore, he looks at the last surviving lizard. Grabbing him by the neck, Kim strangles the last of his future subjects. Pleading to save them, the lizard loses consciousness, his strength ebbs away and his hands come closer to the ground. Events shift once again and return to the hero, who, with his attack, destroyed the slime, leaving only a rune circle burned into the ground. Swinging his sword behind his back, proudly turning around, the hero confidently and silently walks away, not bothering to verify if he really defeated his foe. After some time, a small piece of slime fell from the sky to the ground. Falling from such a height, it spread across the soil. Gradually recovering and enduring the pain, the slime slowly regains consciousness after the incredible ascent and fall. Understanding his precarious situation, the slime quickly crawls towards a cave that would serve as his temporary refuge until he regains his strength. The slime, weakened by the injury, could barely hold its form, let alone restore its previous volume. It urgently needed food to replenish its strength. Issuing threats towards the hero, the slime noticed someone approaching the cave, a person carrying something. People visiting the cave came just in time. The infuriated owner of the cave tossed his catch aside and tried to figure out who devoured everyone inside the cave. On the ground, he only saw a small blob of slime barely moving. The slime paid no heed to what Kim was saying. He saw in him nothing but life-saving sustenance that would help him recover and survive to seek revenge against the warrior in the future. Without hesitation, he leaped onto Kim's face. Kim just stared and stood with a slightly open mouth. Events abruptly take us back to the slime's past, to the times when he was still human. The floor is littered with various trash and dirty clothes. Crumbs from snacks could be seen here and there, and in one place, full-fledged mushrooms had even started to sprout. In the center of this abandoned room sits a large, sweaty man who clearly has issues with excess weight. It seems that he's surrounded by whatever he's consuming, sitting and staring at the television. Many people spoke ill of this man due to his lifestyle, but he saw nothing wrong with it. He lived according to his instincts, without stressing, avoiding unnecessary or hard work. They told him to survive without exertion, and without doing anything that didn't bring him pleasure, excitement, or interest. The man saw no point in doing things that didn't bring him pleasure, excitement, or interest. Moreover, the man didn't listen to his parents, who tried to change something in his life. They turned away from him after he gained extra weight and didn't find a job at the age of 40. To him, it seemed like a minor problem. The man cut ties with his parents. He didn't consider these people worthy of him. Entrusting his fate to the flow, the man went to sleep, and at one moment, he started to tremble. In an instant, the man transformed into a slime and found himself in an unknown but strangely familiar world. In the body of a creature like a slime, the man began to gather strength, aiming to become potentially the most powerful being in this world. He considered himself special, the unofficial ruler of this world. He considered himself the chosen one. Returning to the events in the cave, the battered slime, barely holding itself together, doesn't lose its optimism. Despite all obstacles and challenges, this is just another stage of its development in this world, a stage it will surely overcome. Very opportunistically, just when it wanted it the most, a creature arrived that it thought it could use to restore its strength. It was surely fate. Kim, looking at the pitiful piece of slime, immediately understood who had come to impose their order in his cave, a cave that served as both his refuge and laboratory. Jumping onto Kim's face, the slime decided to indulge in him. Meanwhile, Kim didn't attempt to escape or defend himself. It seemed as though he hadn't noticed the danger in the slime's attack at all. Seeing Kim's slightly open mouth, the slime decided it would be quite creative to devour him from the inside. Entering Kim's mouth, the slime went down his throat into the stomach. Meanwhile, Kim's bewildered face tried to comprehend what had just happened. Recalling the events of the past 2 weeks, Kim remembered how a slime attacked his lab, rendering it practically unusable. The whole cave was covered in a greenish slime. Also, after the arrival of the live slime, the cave began to stink incredibly, which didn't make the experiments any easier. However, there was a positive side to all of this. The slime that destroyed the lab jumped into Kim's mouth and successfully digested, passing on its abilities to Kim. The slime's abilities were quite interesting and diverse, as Kim read from his favorite monster manual. In the slime manual, they were described as creatures that change and adapt based on what they absorb from their environment. Slimes have quite a varied diet, consuming various insects and rodents, as well as soil with minerals. Flipping through the manual, Kim searches for how a slime changes when its diet consists only of minerals and iron. Such a slime very much resembles a drop of mercury, as if from a broken thermometer. They are usually seen in caves. Kim himself could consume minerals before, but the main problem was that there was no benefit to it, so it was just a waste of resources. Such minerals and metals were naturally processed into their usable forms. However, slimes could extract benefits not only from living beings, which played into Kim's hands. Now possessing slime's properties, he had the ability to consume metals and minerals and adopt their properties. This potential was an incredible boost for Kim and brought him closer to his goal. Events are interrupted again and continue in different locations, specifically in dragon-controlled territories. On a large rock, on the actual peak, a big cave is visible. A dragon approaches the cave, not having its own name, but not seeing the need for one due to its arrogance and solitude. The dragon gently lands in the cave on a steep rock. It's clear that the cave is arranged. A large amount of dry grass covers the floor, acting like a carpet. With its predatory and menacing yet intelligent eyes, the dragon gazes down at something on the cave's floor. This dragon has been nicknamed the Crimson Spark, and only one being calls it otherwise. On the floor sat a small dragon hatchling, who affectionately addressed the adult dragon as its mother. The hatchling was tiny compared to its mother. Its wings were still undeveloped, and its scales had not yet gained their vibrant crimson color. Returning to the nest, the mother turned to her offspring, greeting it. The mother and child were delighted to see each other again. Sharing this tender moment of unity, the hatchling reached out to its mother with all its might, trying to get closer. Even with her menacing and fearsome appearance, the mother couldn't hide the happiness she felt in that moment. The lizard men of the great forest bow before the dragon who controls the forest. They regard the dragon not just as a deity, but as the queen of this forest. The lizardmen offer gold and precious gems to the dragon, asking only for protection against external enemies in return. However, recently the dragon devoted less time to patrolling the territories. The birth of the hatchling required the mother dragon to take on greater responsibility and care, taking away the time she used to dedicate to overseeing her domain. Realizing that it was wrong to neglect those she had vouched for, the dragon decided to check on her subjects. Although it was unlikely that anything had happened, it didn't mean that nothing had occurred during her absence. The Crimson Spark hastily flew out of the cave and headed towards the marshy areas of the Great Forest, where the lizardmen lived. Within a moment, she was flying over the swamps, shrouded in mist as always, with almost no vegetation. There wasn't a single creature in the marshes. Flying over the swamps, the Crimson Spark searched for anything or anyone, until her gaze caught something on one of the endless clearings that make up the entire marsh. Descending rapidly and landing abruptly, the dragon tried to brake using its clawed feet. Having landed, the dragon quickly inspected what it had seen from the height during flight. Its gaze sharpened and grew more serious. On the ground, blood and other things were visible, indicating that this place had been a battlefield. Noticing tracks amidst the blood, the dragon understood that an outsider had been here, likely the cause of the fight and the reason for so much bloodshed. Rage filled the dragon. Its eyes reddened more and more, and its veins swelled with blood, bulging. The dragon didn't know exactly who was responsible for the attack on the lizardmen it protected, but it was sure that they would pay for what they had done. A loud roar of an angered beast echoed, a promise of revenge no matter what. Meanwhile, the events returned to Kim. He carefully examined his hand, which was slowly turning green and transforming. As the transformation finished, the hand was covered with dense dark green scales. It resembled the hand of a humanoid lizard. While the scales were strong, comparing them to a werewolf's fur was difficult. But the most interesting aspect of this hand wasn't its strength. Kim was interested in the slime that covered the scales all over the lizardmen's bodies. One of the reasons for his interest was the medicinal properties of the slime, which acted as a natural antibiotic and antiseptic. This made the slime very useful in medicine. However, that wasn't the main reason. What truly intrigued Kim was the narrow functionality of the slime, while the slime of a slime had an incredible versatility in its uses. By absorbing iron, he would have the ability to inherit iron's capabilities and make his slime iron-based. This would make Kim much stronger. The only problem was where to find this iron. Kim set off on a quest to find it. The events move forward. Kim transforms his eyes into falcon eyes to enhance his vision and use it to search for iron and iron ore. Sitting on the hill, he gazed down at the base, scanning for the iron ore he needed. At one moment, he focused his attention on something he saw in the distance. He sat pensively, observing the find and analyzing it. From the hill, he spotted an orc mineral mine where they were extracting valuable resources. Kim realized that this would be far from easy as he had hoped. This was territory controlled by the orc clan, Onyx Ocus. They were the ones overseeing this source of valuable minerals. These orcs were described as tall, red-skinned, humanoid creatures. They were the strongest orcs in the Great Forest, having taken their martial pursuits to the extreme as a very warlike tribe. It was due to their martial and aggressive nature that they were classified as monsters. There were about 40 orcs in the mines. No matter how strong Kim was, even for him, such a small army would be virtually unbeatable. Kim was well aware of this, and closing the reference book, he searched for any options to gain access to the mine. It would be wonderful if the orcs didn't come to the deposit for at least a week or two. But was that even possible? Kim pondered whether such a thing was feasible at all. In an instant, a dark silhouette passed above Kim's head. His hair ruffled as the dragon flew by. Raising his head, Kim watched the dragon's flight in astonishment. He saw a dragon for the first time, and at such close range. Remembering what he had seen in the memories of the devoured lizardmen, he realized that this dragon must have a hatchling. Kim's ability allowed him to partially mimic the victim's brain. Full brain transformation would destroy his consciousness, so having only a part of the brain would yield only partial information. Kim recalled reading in the reference book that dragons fiercely protected and cared for their hatchlings. They guarded them so fiercely that they were willing to kill anyone who came near their offspring. A cunning and crafty plan formed in his mind, and a sly smile appeared on his face. It was the perfect plan. With this plan, Kim wouldn't even need to directly intervene to achieve his goals. The entire plan revolved around the defenseless hatchling. The events take us forward and continue in the dragon's lair. Returning from hunting, the dragon holds its prey, a wolf, in its jaws. The dragon tosses the wolf onto a pile of other lifeless creatures. Among them are other wolves, deer, bears, and anything else the dragon could find and bring. She's stockpiling food for the hatchling before leaving for a while. A bit worried, the hatchling turns to its mother. The dragoness turns to her offspring. Facing the hatchling, the mother dragon imparts her instructions to it for the time she will be absent. She asked the young dragon to stay in the lair and avoid drawing attention until her return. After that, she leaned in close to the hatchling, giving it a farewell kiss. Already standing at the cave entrance, the curious hatchling accompanied its mother with constant questions about when it would have the opportunity to leave the lair. The mother, looking at it with a serious gaze, told the hatchling that it should never leave the lair under any circumstances, and not until the moment she returned. Near the exit, the dragoness began to rear up on her hind legs, as if preparing for something. In an instant, magical rings appeared before her. She was checking the enchantment that was set on the area. It was a magical barrier designed to stop any intruders. Lifting her paws from the ground, the dragoness prepared for takeoff. A long journey awaited her in search of those who had attacked the lizardmen in the swamp. Moments later, the mother dragon left the lair, leaving the small and defenseless hatchling, which couldn't even fly yet, alone for an indefinite period. With sadness in its face and heart, the hatchling watched its sole caretaker depart, unaware of what awaited it in the coming days and what it should do. In a moment, the mother dragon had barely left the cave when the hatchling overcame its sadness, and a red hand seized it by the scruff. The events shift back half an hour before the mother dragon's departure. At the base of the cliff, Kim, together with a lifeless deer, watches the cave perched on the rock. This cave was the dragon's lair, and while he wasn't entirely sure if he was in the right place, all his clues and the information he had led him here. Almost all the information about this dragon was gleaned from the memories of the eaten lizardmans. As they revered the dragon, they knew quite a bit about their protector. To Kim's surprise, everything was much simpler than he had imagined and hoped for. Holding the deer by the neck, he hurled it toward the cliff. In an instant, the deer collided with an invisible magical barrier it hadn't seen before, and unable to overcome it, crashed to the ground. The deer lay on the ground with its muzzle seemingly scorched. Kim had known about the barrier in advance, and understood that there could be complications, so he brought the deer along for testing. Kim had learned about the barrier from the memories of the lizardmans as well, who knew that the dragon guarded its lair where it stored its treasures and its most precious possession, the hatchling. However, Kim's hand reached toward the barrier. Based on everything he knew about this world, he had a hypothesis he wanted to test. Slipping his hand through the barrier as though through water, Kim confirmed his hypothesis and validated his assumptions about this world and its influence on him. Being a person from Earth, he had circumvented numerous local obstacles and dangers simply because local abilities didn't affect him. Leaving the bloodied deer behind, Kim passed through the barrier, moving deeper into the dragon's territory and getting closer and closer to the lair. As soon as the dragon left its lair, Kim wasted no time and began to climb upward, aiming to enter the dragon's lair to finally enact his plan to free the mine. After a while, on a ledge of the cave, a red clawed hand covered in scales resembling a dragon's limb appeared. The hatchling was shocked. It hadn't expected anyone to come, and certainly not so quickly. A strange creature crawled into the cave on all fours. It had red skin, dark hair, and sharp claws that it used to scale the rock. The small dragon hatchling stared in bewilderment at the intruder. The stranger straightened up. It seemed that getting in here wasn't easy for them. At the same time, the hatchling became alert, seemingly ready to resist the uninvited guest. Stretching his neck, Kim, in his improvised disguise as a red orc, complained about the height of the lair. He had large fangs and red skin, the two main attributes of the local orcs. Since Kim hadn't yet consumed any orcs themselves, he created his appearance based on what he had. He borrowed the fangs from trolls and gave himself red skin using the snake with 3 eyes. Of course, the disguise wasn't perfect, and in reality, it differed quite significantly from real orcs, but it was enough to deceive the naive and inexperienced dragon hatchling, which had never seen orcs in its life. Stunned by confusion and surprise, the hatchling hesitantly questioned the newcomer about who he was. Kim paid little attention to the hatchling's questions. He was more interested in what was behind it, gleaming brighter than any precious gemstone. Somewhat surprised, Kim examined the massive mountains of gold and gemstones that towered behind the hatchling, which in turn fiercely yelled at Kim, trying to drive him out of the lair, claiming it wasn't his home. Kim seemingly ignored the hatchling and its words, and he began to move deeper into the cave. Disregarding the hatchling, he walked directly toward the treasures, intrigued by everything he could see in the vast pile of gold and various artifacts. Kim marveled at the rare and valuable resources he had found in this cave. Their combined value and benefit to him outweighed any gain from the orc mine. While Kim was inspecting the treasures, the angered hatchling, unable to tolerate being ignored and having its mother's valuables examined, attacked Kim from behind, threateningly ordering him to leave. Kim reacted instantly and grabbed the hatchling by the neck, extinguishing any desire it had for resistance. While the hatchling cried out in pain from Kim's strong grip, Kim merely complained that the hatchling was too noisy and that its noise was bothering him. He threw the hatchling against the cave wall. After the powerful impact, a dull sound reverberated through the cave as the hatchling fell onto the straw-covered floor. Lying in the dry grass, with no strength to resist its aggressor, the hatchling cried and called for its mother dragon to protect it from the thief who had invaded their home. The events shift forward a week. The mother dragon finally returns to her lair. As she ascends, she gets closer and closer to the cave, which she can call home and where her child awaits. Over the course of a week, she found no traces or leads that would guide her to those who attacked the lizardmans in the swamp. So, with no results to show, she decided to return and check on her hatchling. Landing, she sees the same cave as always, but this time something is different. Something isn't right. The mother dragon scrutinizes and tries to understand what exactly is unsettling her. Understanding that her child usually greets her immediately, she realized that this time her hatchling wasn't able to meet her and greet her. The dragoness's concern grew stronger in her mind. Peering into the cave, she searched for her hatchling. The mother had no idea why her offspring wasn't coming to her and meeting her as usual, but then she noticed her heir. The young dragon, all wounded and battered, lay in its own blood on the dry grass. It was hard to tell if it was alive at all. The dragon mother panicked at the sight of her hatchling in such a state, and couldn't contain herself, doing whatever came to her mind first. In an instant, the dragoness summoned magical circles and used all healing spells she knew, just to save her only hatchling. Gradually, the wounds and bruises began to fade. The hatchling's scales regenerated, and the wounds started to heal. With each passing moment, it looked better and better. After a while, the hatchling stirred, beginning to regain consciousness and opening its eyes, which brought immense relief to the mother. When the hatchling awoke, wasting no time, it climbed onto the dragon mother's snout. Delighted by its rescue, the hatchling broke into tears, continuing to call for its mother. The mother took the hatchling off her nose and attempted to comfort it, telling it that everything would be all right now, because she was there with it. Not wasting any time, the mother tried to find out who dared to harm her offspring. She asked this with a clear thirst for blood and cruelty in her voice. The hatchling, tearful, recounted what the stranger looked like. It was a guy with red skin and large fangs protruding from his mouth. He told how this person ate all the food left by his mother, and took all the treasures with him, leaving only 2 pitiful coins in place of the dragon's former wealth. The dragoness immediately recognized the description of the nearby orc tribe. It couldn't be a coincidence. It had to be them. The mother swore to personally reach everyone who offended her hatchling and send them all to the flames of hell. In an instant, a horrible roar echoed from the lair, a sound that was likely heard throughout the great forest. Kim, standing near the lair, observed the results of his work. Everything worked perfectly, and as planned, the enraged mother dragon would annihilate all the orcs guarding the mine he needed. In an instant, the events shifted to the Onyx Ocus tribe in the orc camp. One of the scouts summons the elder. Holding a dagger in hand, the orc enters the tent where the elder is seated. He reports that during their territory inspection, they found a strange object. In the bushes near the settlement, a suspicious valuable dagger lay. Someone's blood was visible on it. Such an item immediately raised a lot of suspicions among the orc patrol, and they came to the elder to report the find. The orc elder carefully examined the dagger. He couldn't understand how such a valuable item ended up in the bushes. But beyond that, the blood on the dagger concerned him. He needed to find out whose it was. Sniffing, the orc tried to discern the scent of the blood, attempting to figure out to whom the blood belonged and who had been wounded by this dagger. Not believing what he was sensing, the elder, with doubt in his mind, considered that it could have been dragon's blood. Meanwhile, the tent above the elder's head began to tear, and behind it, a dark dragon silhouette became visible. The shocked elder, with a bloody dagger in hand, looked up at the enraged dragon, who sought someone to take revenge upon. Seeing the dagger in the elder's hands, a dagger that carried the scent of her hatchling, the dragon mother no longer doubted. It was indeed the orcs who treacherously attacked her lair, not only stealing her treasures, but also hurting her hatchling. That was something unforgivable. All the orcs would pay for what they had done.